You may have heard a lot in the news about the president and others talking about drugs they think might be helpful or could help or might work for people who are in crisis due to the COVID pandemic. Well, there's this great drug I'm hearing about. There's not a lot of evidence for it. There's no clinical trials, but I think it'll work wonders. I have a feeling or whatever. I want to talk a little about the law that governs those uses of those drugs. My name is Glenn Cohen. I'm a professor at Harvard Law School, and I'm an expert at the intersection of law and medicine. Now, first off, I want to remind you there's a lot of risks involved in taking a drug that has not been cleared by FDA or by others for a particular use. And there's even greater risk that people might hear these messages and really become confused. It's a tragic story of somebody who consumed a form of a drug used for fish in a koi pond and then ended up dead essentially because of this. So we want to just be very careful about our health in these instances. But you might legitimately wonder, what's the law on this? So FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has the primary authority in approving drugs in this country. It reviews 3 phases of clinical trials aimed at showing that a drug is safe and efficacious and has a reasonable side effect as to a particular indication, a particular use. It's a long process, it's expensive. Many drugs don't make it out of this process, to be honest, but it is a process that is time-tested and honored in this country. Nonetheless, FDA realizes that there are instances where people need something quicker. Their lives are at risk. They are terminally ill, for example, and it has a process called expanded access, where for an individual, for a small group of people, or even widespread use, it can approve a use of a drug that has not gone through these 3 phases of approval already. There is also in many states and now in the federal government an even more capacious way of getting access to these drugs called right to try laws. They shift the onus and regulatory burden from FDA largely to doctors and to states instead. Okay, well, beyond unapproved drugs, there are also drugs that have been approved for a particular use that someone wants to use them for a different use. Does FDA control that? Short answer, no. FDA has said that's the practice of medicine and we don't do the practice of medicine. So you as a doctor, if you want to use a drug that has been approved for usage for X and you want to use it for Y, you may do so, and FDA can't say you are violating the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. Instead, you may face some tort liability if you do, but you're allowed to do that as a physician as part of the practice of medicine. What happens if a drug company tries to promote a drug for an unapproved use, including in a COVID pandemic situation? Well, here it gets a little bit tricky. Historically, FDA has taken the position that it does have authority over the promotion of off-label uses. But that authority has been challenged, and in a number of cases, first in the district court, then in the Second Circuit, FDA has lost. And it's been told that it would violate the First Amendment for it to claim a violation of its statute for the promotion of off-label uses. They've never pushed the issue to the US Supreme Court, so it's a bit dicey whether you can promote off-label or not and get away with it under the Constitution. Look for this as a future issue that a future Supreme Court might tackle. Well, I hope I've taught you a little bit about the use of drugs, off-label and unapproved uses of drugs for the COVID pandemic. I'm Glenn Cohen, and I hope you enjoyed watching this.